I'm talking about the JavaScript SPA ecosystem and how we added support for Vue for PowerSync. There's a select group of SPA frameworks that have a majority of the mindshare or developer adoption. Web world. The most popular ones are React, Vue, Svelte, Angular, and Solid.js, and they all kind of work in they work in a similar way. So all of them have some mechanism for defining HTML or something similar to HTML. So we have some frameworks or libraries will use JSX, TSX. In Vue, you have the Vue template syntax, which looks very similar to HTML, but it's a superset or it does something extra. And then these frameworks tend to also have some reactivity model, which is essentially just a mechanism for updating HTML when something happens or something changes, like a variable that can get altered and you want the HTML to that's rendered to change, whether that be like text or color, etc. And then each of these frameworks has some attraction. There's some reason why you'd use them over one another. So some push for performance, some push for developer experience, or something else that is paradigm shifting. But they all, for most problems, you should be able to use any flavor that works for you. And then we also have meta frameworks. So you have meta frameworks that are built on top of these SPA libraries and frameworks, and essentially they're just giving you functionality or features that you do not get out of the box with your SPA frameworks baseline. So this could be something like directory-based routing or server-side rendering. There are other examples like frameworks, these meta frameworks giving you full stack support. For example, in React, you have Next.js. In Vue, you have Nuxt. SvelteKit for Svelte, and then Astro is a popular one that is framework agnostic. You can use it with most of the popular SPA frameworks. Okay, so but why is this important to PowerSync? How does it tie into what we're doing here? So we want to make adoption of PowerSync as easy as possible, no matter the platform. That could be for native mobile. It could be for something like React Native, which is web but translated or transpiled to native, or directly in web. So for example, so for us, we already have a PowerSync web and a PowerSync common packages under our JavaScript repo. And they provide the building blocks for us to support any JavaScript SPA framework. And then there are Vue and Svelte projects on GitHub already that are using PowerSync. And until now, they have had to build their own reactivity and live query integrations. We found a few of them. And then we think that we can save developers time and effort by providing our own bindings for these projects. Additionally, we also already support our own PowerSync React and live query hooks that you can use in any React or Next project. So what does this mean for us or going forward? So we decided to, as a next step, to support Vue and look at some of the other frameworks in the future. So in Vue, you have something called a composable, which works very similar to a React hook. If you look at it from a signature level, they might even look identical. So, for example, if I gave you this snippet of code, it would be you wouldn't be able to tell me whether it's specifically for Vue or React, because it's the same. It's just from this level that we're reading, it just looks like plain TypeScript or JavaScript. But if we start looking at so we wrote this POC for Vue, that took like quite a lot of inspiration from the React hooks that we already have. If we look at the internal code, it will look quite similar, but some of the internal stuff is just a bit different to work for that specific SPA framework. So for example, in Vue, we don't have use state, we have ref, and then in Vue, we also have watch and watch effect, which are minor, they differ in minor ways compared to use effect and React. So most of the code internally, it will follow the same logic, but the primitives that we're using differ a bit. So when we did the design and we had the POC of the Vue composable in hand, we decided to take it as an opportunity to iterate on the original React hook signature. Just to note that this is an alpha. So if we compare this version with the new one, we'll see that we're exposing a bit more information that we have available internally. So data, it's obvious, but we now have a reactive variable called error, which will, any errors that occur for a given snapshot or for a execution that happened of the query, we'll assign the error to that variable. And then we also expose a loading and a fetching state. So loading and fetching differ just a bit. Loading is there for the hard reload state, or when the data is loading to the application. And fetching is basically a Boolean reactive variable that's true anytime when the query is being fired. So for those who don't know, the idea with a watched query is that anytime the dependent tables of this query, so we figure out which tables are changing, or those that we're dependent on, and if any of them are changing, we will refire the query as part of the watched query hook or composable. So fetching will be true anytime we're refiring that query to provide you with updated data. And then just a small note, so the parameters that we're providing to are composable, so the SQL statement and the parameters to the SQL statement, if there are any, they're considered maybe refs, which in Vue basically means either it's a primitive type, so like just a string SQL statement, or it's a ref string, which means in Vue it's a reactive variable. So if it were to change, if you were to modify that ref variable, we'll detect it and react on it. So we'll refire the query if the query changes. And I'll show that in the brief demo afterwards, after the slide. So then alongside that composable, we also introduced use PowerSync, which is the composable which basically works exactly the same or in a similar way to the React hook. So this is great for cases where you want to get the app-wide instance of PowerSync I guess instance, and you want to do something like a command, not a query. So commands are like something like delete or insert. And then we also introduced the composable, which we will backport, I guess, to the React hooks, which allows us to get a reactive view of the status of the PowerSync instance. So these are things like has synced and connected. And then I'll show that in a demo as well. And then lastly, state management obviously also comes up often when we're talking about PowerSync. In the Vue 3 world, we tend to the recommended framework is Pinya, which is just a hyper upgraded version of just a plain baseline composable. So we have tested the PowerSync composable package inside a Pinya store and alongside it. So depending on how you structure your code, you can either completely get rid of Pinya, or you could use them together as you structure your business logic in your code. So here's an example. I hope it's not too small. So here we're using this composable that I was talking about, and instead of passing in a string, I'm passing in a ref, which basically means anytime this variable anytime it gets altered, this thing will refire the query. We're getting access to this PowerSync app-wide instance, and we have a little function here that adds a new list entry. So in the template, we're using these variables that we've defined. We're just taking a text input and we're binding it to the SQL. So this means that when we look at the deployed application or the running dev application, I can type new SQL and it should update continuously as I type. We're showing the loading state, which we've exposed here, the fetching state, which we probably won't see in this demo, and the error state, and then any of the data that we retrieve we'll see as a list, unordered list. And there's a button that calls this add list function. Let's see if I can. Okay, so here we are. Okay, sorry, the styling is horrible, but here's an input field, here's our little list, and here's the button. I can click the add list button, and as I add, it adds a new entry to the database. It syncs it, it's downloading there. I can type here, and as I type, it's going to continuously refire the SQL statement, so I can force an error. It doesn't know what the select X statement is. I can do something like this. It's incomplete. Awesome. So that seems to work. I guess we can do a few if there's any questions about this afterwards, we can go through that. So this was just to show the watched query, but I can also quickly show the status composable that we've added. So this is very simple. You just import it, you call the composable, and then you use the variables in your template. So basically, has the initial sync completed? What is the connected state? And if the downloading or updating, downloading or uploading data flow statuses change as the application is being used, those will flicker. So you can see when I refresh, so I'm continuously refreshing the tab just to show that it's starting to start up and the data gets updated, which just shows that the reactivity is working. And every time I refresh, you can see that the last synced at time is actually changing. And then now and then you might see a brief flicker of the uploading and downloading happening, depending on what. I think it's mostly just the downloading that might happen. Yeah, so that was the brief demo. And then I think I had one more slide left. There we go. So what's next in terms of this work? So this package is available. It's on npm. It's currently in alpha, and we want to get it from alpha to beta to production. And to do that, we need developers to try it. And then beyond that, we still need to publish our own, or we still want to publish our own PowerSync Nux module, because we can't. You need to do some configuration work to get these projects to work inside of Nux, based on how they do configuration flow, basically. So we already have a POC of that working using their defined Nux plugin utility. And then beyond that, we probably want to investigate introducing Svelte, Solid, and Angular bindings or integrations down the line. But we'll see as how the priorities change over time. And I mean, if it's something that gets asked often, maybe we can look at that. And then, yeah, any questions or feedback is welcome on our Discord and GitHub. And thank you for your time.